So this is a lovely, beautiful, very kind of still, calm, wintry picture. And there's the choice of these or these beautiful ones as well. With acrylics, we're going to be layering up. So, putting one layer on top of another. So we tend to layer up with the whatever's very much in the back first and then put lots of layers over the top. So if you're doing any of the ones with the trees, your trees will be the last really kind of layer over to go over everything that comes in the background first. The same here. So I'll talk you through how I would kind of layer up this. So the first thing I'm going to have a go at doing is just really just popping a few little sections into place. So it's really just kind of a few, like obviously this is a more straightforward one. You've got kind of sky behind, and then this section, a little bit of a section in the middle, and then this bank here. And then I wouldn't bother putting the trees on until we've actually got all of the colours in the background. We tend to, whichever one we're doing, we tend to start with the sky anyway, because most things overlap the sky and they're obviously at the very back of the landscape. So we'll focus on that. But if you're doing something like this, it's very heavily got a lot of trees, and you can almost just pop a few of the shapes of the bottom where you've got a block here. That would be absolutely fine to get that, a little section there and a section across here. Um, so with this one, I'm going to do here, I'm literally just going to put a section across here where the horizon is. Now, if there's a lot going on in your landscape, what you can do to break it up further is just put it into quarters. That might help. So you can do that if you want to. You can do that on your paper and on your board as well, if that helps. So that then you can see how far down each of the quarter, everything comes into these sections. So not this bit here. So within this section, for example, here, we can see that we can get this little bit of rock and things like that. So it just helps you kind of break down, particularly I feel, where you've got a lot going on. So where you've got loads of trees, that can be quite helpful because you can then see how many, trees and how many trunks there are in each of those little quarters there. Okay. So all I'm going to do now is nice and lightly, I'm just going to nice and lightly pop in where these rocks are coming over here. Now I'm doing this quite darkly on my surface here, just so that it picks up on the camera. But if you're doing anything, sketching anything out in pencil first, then what you might want to do is just just do it nice and lightly, and then we don't get too much, it get too muddy, because what can happen is it can get quite muddy. Um, because especially when we're using light colors and acrylics, it can lift up some of the pencil underneath. So that's why I say do it lightly. Obviously, I really got to do it like this. And then I'm just going to get the horizon. Now, some people struggle with the horizon of the back of the sea because if it's very straight, often is very straight, it's difficult to sometimes to make it straight. So you can use something like I don't know, like a edge of a ruler or something. The other thing you can do is to put on a little bit of tape underneath. Now, if you've got like A4 or A3, you'll have plenty of space. I need to obviously draw these other sections in, but you can use it as a guide anyway. So you can put that, I'll use that there. And so then when you come to do the sky, you can paint, it doesn't matter if you paint over this tape then. So I'm just going to lift that for the time being. So all I'm going to do now is look across these two sections. Let's make this a bit more even. And then try and get a sense of this kind of wave of water. Get that into place. But I'm not really, don't do this really perfectly because more often than not, when we start to go into the painting in a bit more detail, we tend to adapt anyway as we go, and that's great if you want to do that. Absolutely fine. So then we're like looking at what else we've got. There's a little bit of rock here. And then the only other thing I'll probably draw is this bank coming down here. I'm not even worrying too much about the grasses because they'll go on finally over the very top because we've got all of this that comes first before the next thing overlaps. So I'm just going to just put as a general idea where this bank of snow comes down. And then there's another one here, so I'll pop that in. And for me, that's all I'm really going to put in there. You know, this one's obviously, there's not much going on here. They're quite still, whereas you've got the trees. And I would say, you know, you put your river and your bank in, but the trees, just leave them. And then we can just literally paint them over the top once we've got all of the snow in between. Sometimes people do put them in, and that's fine. If they're really significant size, like this is a great big bank here of trees. So you can see, you know, that makes sense to actually put that in there. And but here we can just kind of pop this over. It's very difficult to try and poke these colours between the actual trees themselves. And it can look a little bit false if we do that. So in a way, just doing the whole of the background sky colours first works really well and makes it feel a bit more natural as well with the light coming through. And the same with this one. It's difficult kind of to get all of these little bits of snow and the sunsets and things coming through. So we get these fantastic colours. So I think one of the things that, to focus on is the colour. And just to kind of have a think about, especially if you've got the snowy ones in there, because what we tend to find is where we have kind of sunset areas, we get these fabulous reflections sometimes on the water. Like we're getting this coming through here, and we get all of these different shades which we can layer up, you know, in a little bit, a bit further on. So, you know, we have all this effect, and then sometimes the snow is quite well lit. So again, down here it's quite warm because the sky is so warm. We've got all these, anything on the warm spectrum like yellows and reds, you know, and it just warms up the colour of the snow a little bit. So more often than not, the snow isn't always just white. It has like where it's in the shadow, it might have a grey tone. We might think that some of it's got kind of quite bluish tones in there. So we'll look at all of those colours when we come to it. This one, again, has got some quite greyish tones in the shadows here, blue greys. And then the contrast is these really warm areas and very dark areas as well, which makes the warm colours look beautiful. So yeah, so one of the things with to get a sunrise or a sunset in place and is thinking about whether you want a sky that's kind of quite blended. This one is the only one really that's got any cloud cover. And again, we would just have to start, if we've got anything with cloud cover, we're starting to look at the colours behind that before we start to overlap the other colours. So I'd be looking at putting these colours on this one first. Now I'm going to go for this particular kind of sky because I just love this so much. So I'm going to swap this one out and pop it in there. But again, here you've got these lovely warm colours. Some of them are more pastel-y. So this is the biggest difference between, say, a sky like this and this one, is that this one is so vibrant and it's got a lot of warmth coming through it. So, um, so we don't maybe use much white with this one, whereas this one is very pastel-y. We've almost got some very light peachy tones, which we can get by putting a lot more white in. So pretty much when we're looking at sunsets, we're just thinking about how much has that sky actually got white in it, because we can end up taking that colour right out. I'm just going to pop my little bit of tape back in place actually for this so that I can bring this over it. And I'm going to get some colours out and I'll go right from from scratch. So I'm going to go in, I've got to get a few different colours similar to this. I may go a little bit even richer than this, even stronger colours. I'm going to use a warm red. This one's a Acadian red. We can tell it's a warmer one because it's a bit more yellowy in tone. This is a warm yellow. This one is an azo yellow, but you might have something called cadmium yellow. So if you have more than one yellow in your set, you may have something a bit more like this, which is kind of a bit more lemon yellow. It's a bit more acidic. So if you have got lots of yellows and oranges in, or the different kinds of reds and yellows, then just squeeze a little bit of each out, and then you can try mixing them together to get your oranges and see which you like, because they'll give you a different effect. This is going to give us a warmer tone. So I'm just going to get some of this yellow out here. That's my warm yellow. Going to get out as well, because I think I may use some of the lemon yellow for some of these bright, kind of more lighter colours here. So I'll try that as well. And all of the sets are completely different, give us different tone. And then I'm going to get out some of the cadmium red. Now you might have, there might be all sorts of different reds. All of the different brands name things slightly differently as well. There's some that are similar. But you might find that you might, have like scarlet red might be a similar-ish colour. And then you find the cooler reds. I'm not actually going to use a cooler red because I know I'm not going to use it. But a cooler red is something like Alizarian Crimson, and it's got more blue in it. So it's a cooler red. Although red's still a warm colour, it's slightly cooler because it's got a bit more blue in, and this has got a bit more yellow. So we can choose our colours based on how warm we want this palette to be. So that's nice as well. And then I'm going to get out a little bit of white, because there may be a few more peachy bits down here that I might use. So I'm just getting mine lined up around the outside, really, just so that I can bring in bits and bits in there to use. And then I'm going to be thinking also overlapping a small amount. I think this feels a little bit misty, so I might overlap a little bit of this, but I'm not going to do it at the same whilst it's still too wet, because I don't want to get a mixture. Sometimes if we put a blue base colour like a violet or a purple over the top of a warmer red, we can end up with creating a bit of a muddy feel. And that's the same when we introduce blues. So these blues, if we mix that with the yellow oranges, what we can end up with is a bit of a green sky. So we've got to be a little bit careful with how we apply the things, cool colours and warmer colours, so we don't end up with what we call muddiness. But I wouldn't worry too much to start with about it. Just have a little go. We can sometimes get a bit too tied up with those. There we go. So there's another colour here. Again, it's not really cool. It's still got a bit of a warm tinge to it, but it's also does have a slight cool. So I might just put that in a little bit. I'm going to go in with a pinky colour, but you could make a lilac, and I'll probably put a little bit of pink and a little bit of violet out here, so that I can then add some white to make it lilac if I want to, because that is quite pastel-y. Sometimes we use pastel colours for effect, to do, to purposefully do that, and sometimes we don't. I'm just gonna get a bit of kitchen roll or get a bit of rag or something, just so I can wipe off any of the colours. So what I'm going to try and aim for are lots of different colours together. So this I'm going to go for a brighter, like reddy orange, then still a warmish one, and then I'm going to look at a kind of a peachy colour here, and then quite a much lighter yellow at the bottom. But what I'm going to try and do is mix my colours up so that they're all ready, because one of the things people sometimes find difficult with acrylics is getting a blended sky. Now you don't have to blend at all, but it's just one of the skills I thought I would bring in, because it's something that people find a bit more tricky. But you can use a nice linear style and use the acrylic so you can see the brushwork. This is all about what you want to do. So if you find you don't really like this blended effect, then it doesn't matter at all. Go in and get your brushwork in there, absolutely fine. So I'm just going to fill up, I've got a little pipette here. I'm just going to fill it up. Um, and then when I'm mixing my colours, when I've tested them and I'm happy, I've just got a bit of tester paper here, then I'll just add a little bit of water in the mix. So I'm just going to mix it. So obviously the thing with reds are very heavily pigmented. So you often need a lot less red when you're mixing up things like oranges. And as I said, you might have some other colours in your kit that you like, and just have a, test them out. You really just want to end up with some colours that you really love. They really gel with you. Think, oh gosh, do you know what? I'm going to use that. So it doesn't often it ends up not being like the photograph because this is your artist impression. That's the important thing. Let's see. Oh, I do like that actually. So I'm going to go, let's see if I can get a different one as well. So that's one of my colours. I think I'm going to have that at the top. I'll go for an even lighter version of it. Much more yellow. Again, just keep mixing the colours and testing until you're happy with what you've got. Just get them all kind of lined up side by side. The reason I'm doing this is so that we can get a really nice blend on them. Mm -hmm. And a lot of people say that, sometimes at the beginning find the colour blending difficult, but actually it's just one of those things. The more you do it, I think it sticks with us more. The more, when you're exploring different colour palettes, this one's a very warm colour palette. So sometimes it sticks because we remember mixing something. It's a very physical thing to do. When you've got like a palette of colours that you're really happy with, I just want a kind of I think this time I'm going to try and go in for a bit more of a peachy one over here. And so for this, I'm going to add a bit of white. Take some of this colour that I've mixed up. I'm going to make a tint with it, which is really, it's just a colour. It's just white that we add to a colour when we say the word tint. It just means any colour added with white. And you can see immediately it's just taken out the brightness, hasn't it, of that completely. So, just decide whether that's going to be too pastely for you or not. We're just exploring that and seeing what happens when we add the colours. I'm just adding a bit back to it because I feel like I want a little bit more, just a bit more colour in there. And I'm going to use some of this really light yellow, but you can add white to a yellow, a lemon yellow or something like that if you've got it. Do that, or you can warm it up and add a bit of peach to it if you want to. Just have a good play around with the colours that you've got. quite nice to test them because then you end up with all sorts. And you can see the colours together and how they sit on the canvas, how they'll sit together. And if you like them, if you feel like they work together, or you can adapt them. So I'm going to start to paint these on in a minute. I just want to add a little bit of water. Just a few, I'm just adding a couple of drops. And you can do this with a brush, it's absolutely fine. But I like to get mine to be quite buttery so that I'll put plenty of paint on when I'm doing these backgrounds. But they need to feel like they're moving really easily. If they feel like they're dragging, it means, you need to add some more water perhaps. And also it can mean that you need to put more paint on your brush. So I'm just start with a few drops and then you can just add more as you go. We don't always have to mix up all of the palette together. I just find it works really nicely for getting that nice blend so that all the colours, we can get that nice kind of blend without having the lines between. If you've got a sky that's very clear, but with lots of colours in. There we go. So just trial and error really. And it depends what acrylics you've got because they're all so different. Some are what we call heavy body acrylics, so they're really thick, and so you need to put a lot more water with them. And others are a bit smoother, a bit more buttery to start with, so you need less water. So it's just really trying to, explore with your own set. So I'm going to go in with a flat brush. Now I'm working quite small, but this morning I had a really big flat brush because I was working on A4 or if you're working, sorry, A3. But that gives you a really good coverage. You can cover your sky really well with that. But obviously I'm scaling it down because I'm working on a much smaller piece now. And really it's just about starting to get your colour on. So I'm going to go with this one here. Move that one up there. It's just to get some of these colours on. And I just tend to find that I just go backwards and forwards, just side to side with it. I'm going to go underneath these colours here anyway. Plenty on, so it should feel like really easy to go on and quite thickly. So if you can see, if I turn my brush there's a couple of millimetres on there. Quite a lot of paint because then you can get it to really glide and then it will blend beautifully into each other. So I have got quite a lot of paint on there and that's what makes it blend quite nicely. And it's smooth enough because it's kind of moving. So once I go in with another colour and just start enjoying that paint, the feel of the paint on the palette as well. And then I'm going with a lighter one here. So to start with, it will feel a bit like you will get a bit of a linear feel, it'll be a bit of a, so I'm just laying the paint down first before I start to move it around. And then you can start to just work those colours, the edges into each other. You get this start to get this lovely blend backwards and forwards with it until it just blends, and it will. Might mean that you might have to put a little bit more paint on perhaps or something, but And then you can start to move in your other colours then as well. Because these are all quite similar cut tones, they're all on the warm spectrum. It's not going to matter too much if they get a little bit, blended together, because um, they're not going to cause us any issue. So you can use the edge, or you can use this, sideways together. And then keep working down, all the colours in there. Just keep moving them backwards and forwards until you're getting them to do, so they're kind of going together. So I can get this little lovely bit of harmony in there. Then I'm going to bring in this bottom layer. It's really quite bright by the horizon there. All the way across, actually. Bring that behind as well here. The lighter one. And then I'm going to bring some of this brighter one through here. So again, the other thing we can do is because I'm seeing a bit of a lighter area, you can start to add bits where you're seeing where you feel like you want to add them as well. You can go a little bit off now with them in your own way. Explore. If you're doing a kind of brush mark and you think, oh, I really like that, then do a bit more of that. Because this is our artist's impression. So it means you can take it any which way you want. I'm just going to bring a little bit more of a brighter colour back through there. Part of us exploring it really. Okay. So I'm going to bring in some of this bit of cloud in here now as well. So let's have a little look. So I want to actually mix up a little bit. Try and get this more kind of moody colour over just in this top corner here. And then some kind of violety colours here. So you can go in with a violet. So again, your purples are a different kind. So your violet, the cobalt one like this, has got more blue in it. And we can tell, like, we put blue next to it, it's very kind of, it is a bluish colour. So I'm just going to grab my other purple because the other one has got a red base. Okay, so you can see the difference. This has got more blue, this has got more red, so it's it's a warmer colour. So you can explore that as well and decide, do you want to, do you want one that's a bit warmer to match the reds, or do you want one that's a bit cooler? So I'll just squirt that one on there as well. Because it's always interesting just to have a little mix them up and see what you get and explore that. So, I could just add a bit of that and a bit of red together and see what happens. It'd just be a bit more of a reddy purple, won't it? Use it on its own, or you can go really dark and add a little bit of violet to it, or you could just go in with violet. The other colour you can use that's very dark is Payne's Grey, but it just depends on how light and how bright you want to keep it. Some people don't like too much shadow on. That's fine. So if you're not sure, you can always start a bit lighter and then go a bit darker later. I'm just going to pop a little bit of Payne's Grey on here. And we can just test it, try it out and test it. So I add a bit of Payne's grey, that one there. And just, just then that can help you make your mind up. I'm feeling it's too dark, but if you love a bit more of a moody sky, that's absolutely fine. Go for it. Which is why we've got to give things a little bit of a try. So I'm just going to go in now with a round brush. So, just an ordinary round, and I'm just going to add some of this here over. Now I'm watering this down a bit more. I've just gone in with this one, which has got a bit more of a reddy brown, and I'm just bringing that over the top. If we water it down, it creates like a mist, so we can drag that over and it won't be too thick. And then you can also, if you decided you wanted to make it a bit brighter, darker or whatever, you can just put another layer on there. I'm making that a bit thinner. Just bringing a few little bits in. But again, it's just decide where you want to do. Naturally, I'm going to take that back out and cover it because I'm not as keen on that. I'm liking these really vibrant colours over here, so I'm going to stay with that. Which we can pop in at any time, actually. That's the beauty of acrylics. And then there's just this kind of like really gorgeous lilac-y colour here. So again, that is very pastel-y, so that's where you could actually add some white. And again, you've got two very different kinds of purple. So if I add a magenta, which has got it's got more red in it, we end up with that kind of lilac. And if I go for a violet, which is blue, more blue based than white. It's just interesting having a little play and seeing. Sometimes we don't use all of the colours in our set, and we get this much cooler kind of a violet. Obviously, we can put more white in so that it becomes very pastel-y. Yeah, they just gives you two different colours. Then you can decide, which is it. I'm actually quite liking the warmer one, so I'm going to go for that. So we've got this kind of mist. It's a bit pulled over. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab it here, and I'm just going to just pull and drag it upwards in there with my flat brush, because we can get this like lovely effect with the clouds. With just the edge of a flat, just kind of by pulling it. And kind of just dragging it over, really. But you can use any brush in lots of different ways. That's the beauty, I think. Just drag, just pull, pull, pull. Over there. And then if there's anything else that you want to add to your sky, you might want to pop a little bit of a darker colour on there. You might think, actually, I want to balance it out. I want, there's this bit here. I want to add a little bit more depth in the clouds. I want it to be a bit more red. Then just go for it. Have a go and have a play, because you won't know if you don't try it out. You'll never know whether you're going to like it or not. you might be really happy with the result. Or you might think, oh, I'm really not keen on that colour, but that's great because you've tried it out. So I'm just going to just going to take this back down. Because I'm actually going to stick with the horizon here. So the other thing we've got as well is this one. It's thinking, how do we, if you were wanting to put this in there, the actual sun, I might actually just pop the sun back into here. Some people think, well, what colour is this and how do I get that? Well, what we need to do there is build up the bright colour around the lighter one, and so that this bit in the middle actually pops. So we can go in, if you wanted to have a little go with a palette knife to get like a nice kind of bright light in there, you can. We can go in around where it's a bit brighter. And this is where, again, it's completely trial and error with how you pop it on. But if you want to pop on, I just get the bottom edge of the palette knife here. Doesn't matter if you get a little bit on it. And then on some spare paper, you can just practice kind of dragging that across so you get that nice bright kind of line at the bottom. Again, it's really good fun. So I'm going to do that. Work out where the bottom of my yeah, and you can almost kind of make a drag across, but almost pull it up a little bit as well. And just have a little explore, because the tools are quite interesting to bring these colours in. They're not always really tidy when we do them, but we can get used to using a tool the more we use it and see what happens. So I'm going to go in with this other really light colour one now. I'll just take that one off. Try and build up these bright yellows around. And again, I'm going to bring it across. And then I'll stop in a moment, come and chat and see if anyone's got any questions. So I'm just kind of bringing in these real pops of brights across down this bottom section here before I actually go in and put the really light colour in the middle. But we often need the warmth to make it pop around it. And then I'm just going in with a real bright now in the middle with a bit of white there. Wouldn't be able to see that though unless I had the warm colours around it. It shines brighter when we have all the warm colours around. And I'm just using the tip there to pop that on. Just gives a bit of a different feel. And then once I go over the sea, I'll pop that down a little bit further. And then you can top up if there's anywhere else around it you think, oh, actually, I need a little bit more brightness for it to pop. Just add in a little bit more of the other yellows or the oranges, whichever. And then see if you can get a little bit, step back from your work a little bit as well to see how it feels. And if there's any areas where you think I wanted to I want to overlap those two colours a bit more, and just this should be still damp enough. A lot of it depends on the temperature of the room we're in. So if you're your space is a bit colder, like mine is, it takes a bit longer to dry anyway. And if it's warmer, it'll dry quicker. Okay, I'm going to take a pause there though and come and chat to everybody. Right, so let's have a little look. So let's move this one back over here. I'm going to move this one now because I'm going to get some of this land in. So at the back here, obviously we want less detail, and so that this bit at the back doesn't pop forward, we'll be thinking about some cooler colours. So to start with, I'm just going to put a little bit of that land in there, and I am actually going to go in with Payne's Grey. So if you haven't got Payne's Grey, you could use like a bit of blue and a bit of dark brown, like, let me find it. I've got some burnt umber here. So you could use a blue and a brown together to get a dark colour. Now, some people do use black, that's fine. Sometimes it can be quite intense and quite flat. So I, in landscapes, tend not to use them very much unless there's something in there that's, like really dark or really man-made. But there's nothing wrong with doing it either. If you really want to do that, that's fine. So I would go in with some Payne's Grey. And if I didn't have Payne's Grey, I would just put a little bit of ultramarine blue, or some phthalo blue, or just whichever blue you've got in your kit, and a bit of brown. But I'm just going to go in with this one. And again, I'm just going to use the edge of my palette knife, which should be a bit more testing because it's such a small picture here, but we'll give it a go. Just to get in, which means I might need to dampen this a bit more. So sometimes your palette knife starts to dry at the edges as well, so you've got to be like that. And where there's a little bit of land, I'm just going to move that up a little bit. It doesn't have to be identical to what you can see there anyway. We want a suggestion that there's some land in there. And I'll put a little bit over here as well. Go, and I've kind of, this bit on here for me, the one I've done is actually quite, I've dragged it across a bit, so it's kind of thinned it down a little bit, so it's a little bit of it's not a really straight edge, it's got more of a natural edging, so that's all I've done with that. But you can put a nice crisp edge in if you prefer to. Keep that up there. And then looking at some of these lovely cool colours at the back. So we've gone quite warm in the sky here, but people will often say, well, how do I get, when I'm doing this bit here, but it's jumping forwards and it's right down in the horizon. Why is it coming forwards, Becky? So sometimes that's just because the colour that you've put in there is too light or too warm. So the general rule of thumb, I know I've mentioned this a lot, but it really helps us with our landscapes, getting these back bits to go back, is that the general rule of how colour works is that dark, cool colours recede. So anything that's got a blue base in it is a cooler colour, will recede, it'll go backwards. And so will, like the darker colours as well, they'll go backwards. And anything kind of warm or bright will come forwards, or light. The lightest things come forwards the most. So if I make that really lighter than this, it's going to come forwards, but obviously this is going to make this lighter. So I am going to drop some kind of cool blue colours into there. So it might just be that I'm using a bit of violet and a bit of Payne's Grey. Tiny touch of Payne's Grey, because I want it still a bit of that violet colour. Or you could just drop a bit of blue in it. I'm going to drop a bit of white in it as well. And I'm thinking I'm going to need some blue, so I'm just going to get some blue out. This one I think is cobalt, which is not dissimilar to some of the ultramarines, depends on the brand. So I'm mixing a bit of this blue in. But I am going to come for a little small amount of white. I don't want it to be really too light pastel-y, but just create enough that it's a bit muted. And I'm just going to go in with a thin colour, thin brush, sorry, a round one. And I'm just going to put that across the back there. Now, if you find this really difficult, you can always turn your board or your paper round as well. So I'm going to go in with this one. It's a bit kind of more, it's cooler toned, so that it goes backwards a little bit. And then within there, if there's any lighter areas you want to lighten, I'm not going to lighten them massively, but I'm just going to put slightly lighter, very small amount of white in there, just so that we've got a bit of a difference in that bit of land there. And then between it, you know, you can do the next layer if you want and overlap that, or you can just pop these in. I'm going to just put, this one's a little bit more shadowy. Use that same colour. I've just dropped a slight more shadow in here into this middle bit there. And then it feels quite cool over here. It's almost a bit more, I'm going to drop the tiniest bit of this dark brown in, just so it's going to cool it off, make it more shadowy, because it is in the shadows around there. So we would expect that. I'm adding a little bit of brown to that blue. And what it will do is take out any of the kind of warmth, if there's any, not really any warmth in it, but if there's any, it'll just make that slightly darker hue. Make it feel slightly more shadowy. And you can even, like, you can see around the edge of this bit of the beach where it is more shadowy than the other. So you can use a couple of different ones if you want. Now it might be getting less blue and more sandy coloured here, so we can change that in a moment as well, and just pop in a bit of white and a bit of, so I've got a bit of white and a bit of the colour I've just been using there. It's a bit greyish, a bit of a grey tone, white and blue, and a bit of purple. It's this one I've been using. But then to warm it up slightly in some of these areas, I'm just going to pop a little bit of yellow in there, or if you've got something like a yellow ochre, you could try adding that. And that will just make it slightly more of a sandy colour without it becoming really warm, because we want that blue. This is where we can use the cooler colours to actually quite to effect, so that we're not getting too much warmth in it. So then you can just bring in two of those colours side by side there. and then start to kind of get some of the edge of that the water's edge here. And all we're doing really is we're just interpreting what we can see with our own colour choices and just observing how things, are more shadowy sometimes and more cooler sometimes, or brighter and warmer sometimes. It just helps us on our journey with every topic that we come across. So if I want this to be a bit warmer now, I can add in some other little colours before I think about popping that C in. You might want to put a little bit more yellow in there. Or if you have it, a good colour, or if you want to try it, is something called buff titanium. So buff titanium is the same as titanium white, except it has no bleach in it. So titanium white is bleached, basically, that's why it's white. Without that, this is what it looks like. This is the natural colouring for it. So buff titanium is a great colour for sand and things like that, if you want that kind of a, and it's quite cool because it's not got much warmth in it. It's it's not a really, really like there's a lot of warmth in that yellow. So it's quite a good base to use. And if not, you can, to make this, you could just put a tiny bit of, in fact, I've got the colours there, so I'll show you. I'll show you what the buff titanium looks like there. Oops. A little bit faster. Um, so the buff titanium there, you can add like cooler colours or warmer colours to it. I could add a little bit of blue to that. To make this cooler kind of sandy area, because I don't want it very, I don't want it too warm because it's still in the shadows there. You pop that in. I'm just using a little round brush, but you can use a flat brush and carry on with that if you prefer. The smaller the brush you use, you can end up with a lot more lines, but actually I quite like some marks in this bit because the sand might have texture in it anyway. So I quite like to build up my mark making on there, but it just depends on how you feel about it. You might like it to try more blending like we did earlier. And then you can just weave through some highlights wherever it's a bit lighter over the top, with a bit of a white colour or just a tint, so a colour mixed with white. You kind of build up to these highlights as we go. The highlights are the last things that we put onto place for those areas. And then we're just, getting all of those in little areas. You can go all the way down to where your overlap will be with the grasses. That's absolutely fine. So we're just kind of varying the landscape a little bit there before we pop our C in and try and reflect the colours that are in there. So something like that. Oh, sorry, I was going to show you how to make buff titanium. So you can just use a bit of white, tiny bit of brown, really tiny bit of brown because it's quite a strong colour with the dark one. And then a little bit of yellow, whether that's a lemon yellow or another yellow. Eventually, look, you'll end up with a very similar colour to that. So that's how you make rough titanium yourself. There we go. Right. So thinking about the colours in here. So with when we think about water, generally, and it's slightly different, I think, with this one. just because of where the colours are in the sky, where everything is reflected. And it's very, very dark here on around, so you're getting just a very slightly different outcome to how often water is. But you'll see with the other ones, generally, what you find is that the colours in the water are reflected, so there's a lot less contrast in the water. So in the sky, we've got more contrast, but between really bright and cooler, brights and lighter colours. In the water, you tend to find that the lightest colours are reflected slightly more darkly, and the darkest colours are reflected slightly more lightly, which is why we've not got too much contrast in here for this sunset. It's quite, you can't really, you can only just see there's a slight difference, and that's kind of what happens. So, same in here. So you've got less contrast in the water, but you still need all of the elements. So you need, in this one, you'd need your shadows put in first. I tend to put the shadows in first, and then we can go over with those lovely ripples. And then in here, I'm just going to find a couple of nice tones. I'm going to put that yellow in on last, because that is where we're getting this reflection of the sun and everything here, the lightest. It's reflected slightly more darkly in there, but that's the lightest. So I'm going to try and find these kind of orangey colours here. And go in with an orangey colour. So if you're wanting something to feel glassy, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? I'm going to find, just mix up something that's a little bit more peachy for in there, so it's less vibrant than what I've got in my sky. My sky is quite bright, by the way, so whatever would be reflected would be slightly brighter than what I've got anyway. So I might just add a little bit more, slight bit more orange to this. So I need enough water so I can glide this on as well. So if you're wanting like a really glassy surface, it really is about putting plenty on and then just pulling. So you and it doesn't matter if you go over something else, that's fine. We can correct that. Now, if it was me, because I'm left-handed, I find I would have to turn this round anyway. But you're wanting plenty on, so you can literally just move that. And keep trying. It is, as I said, it's something you just have to keep going with. Not many people do get it on the first try. But it's a start having a go with a tool, one of these tools, because if we don't try, we're not gonna know how to even do it. So yeah, so just bring thick slabs of glassiness over the top. Keep going. It might just be that you have to pop in some of these other areas back in again. That's absolutely fine. Oh, I'm just popping it on the edge again, right on the edge here. And then just kind of, that's a long thin edge. So I'm put it on there. And you can drag, you see, the different colours over the top then of the ones underneath. And then you can go in with the colours over the top of there. So you don't have to do all of it, by the way, either with it. So if you're wanting to get a nice curve, you can always go in with your other highlight colour and just just neaten up the edges. You can use lots of tools to get the effect that we want. And we can re-neaten up edges as well. So again, you know, if you're wanting to go in, you can go in and just use your brush and pull in those nice reflections in there from the sun. Or you can go in and continue to use your palette knife. Have a little play and see what you fancy. It just gives a nice kind of a watery feel. We get that, you know, real reflection from it. We've got a real block of colour in there. So I'm going to come in and just pop in some of the edges now with my brush because this is quite tiny. Might be you've got a really light, or you know, it's really light at the water's edge, and you want to pop that highlight in where the light's hitting the water on the shore. You can also use something called a rigger brush as well, which is thin and long. You might have used one before, about 3/4 of an inch to an inch. And what you would do with those, if you want to kind of get a light colour, and you just, or whatever colour, you just roll it. Just make sure it's damp though, not soaking wet because you want it to drag the paint quite well, and then you just roll it. And then you can just drag that around the edge that you want. Makes it really easy. Or, you know, drag it over a highlight if you're wanting a highlight in the sea, for example. And there's a lot of real on the water. Just do that. You can also do it to get those bits of blend in place as well. Just been doing there at the back. I can pop these back in there. Pull it all there along. There's lots of different things that we can try. They're really nice. And then with the rocks and things like that, you can put texture in if you want to. I would always start here by trying to get the shadows in first. And again, go in with as thick a brush as you want or as thin a brush as you want. I'm just going to go straight in with my Payne's grey here and a bit of blue. I'm keeping it quite cool, but you can put it brown in, see what happens. You can see the different tones if you've had browns to the blue or not. And I'm just going to go in with a nice round brush, and I'm going to kind of dab in the texture. But again, if you wanted to try your palette knife, and you could put the dark in on its own with the brush and then scrape over some of the texture. I'll show you that. So I'm just going to try and I'm putting lots of separate marks on here. And this is one of those things where I'm just using the tip. So I've got my hand quite lightly. I'm not going too near. I find if I go too near the edge of my brush, I end up being too precise with it, and I try and bring my brush a little bit further down because it makes me be looser, especially where you've got things that are more naturally occurring, like the rocks and things. You know, some of these movements might be upwards, some down. It might be there's some more grey areas on there. You just add a little bit of white to your mix. And I will do that before I started to add any colours, any white for the snow. And then add the snow last. So you can go in with your brush and just dab on where you get these kind of snowy patches on the top, around there. Biggest thing is keeping them nice, and if you want them to pop, is to not to over mix it if it's wet on the page. So you can do that, or you can go in with your palette knife and just, you know, just pull down. Just use the tip if you want, or the edge, and you can get kind of that scratchy effect on there. And then just build those. And those will pop forwards, the bits that are really light coloured. Will create a 3D effect because you've got the darker the shadows that gets the depth. It shows how deep something is. The kind of grey is the mid-tone. That's, giving a little bit of shape, and then the lightest colours pop forward, so that makes it 3D. But you could bring in all sorts of tones into there. And then, you could go on to the different kinds of tones between these, because if you look here, we've got these real little highlights where it was catching, where it's catching the light on here. It's a beautiful peachy effect on top of the different blocks here. So I would put these grasses on last and start to kind of mix some colours for here. So I'm not going to go straight in with white. I'm actually going to make a tint of a slightly bluish colour here. I'm going to still use that bluish there, but I'm making it a bit brighter blue. And just get that in before we go on to kind of getting all the grasses and everything on. So I'll just do that, and then I'll come and chat to everyone, see how we're getting on there. Before we think about popping the glasses on. So, right. And you could use, if you wanted to, you could use a different type of blue for each of these sections. If you're going to mix blue with them, you don't have to, of course, but I'm going to. You could even use violet in one. Well, that one is with cobalt blue, I believe. Just a very small amount of blue. But you could even use cerulean blue, which would be a bit more of a turquoise. That'd be quite interesting, actually. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to put this one here. And I'm just going in with a round brush because I just want to pop a bit of water in there. Now it's going to be a bit dry. Paints do dry out over the evening. What I'm doing is I'm just putting in a little bit of direction that's not completely flat. Popping in a little bit of direction where I want this to. So I'm going up the bank, basically, here. working this between. And I am putting some of my texture in there. And then I'm going to put, as I'm going up the top here, I'm just going to put a very, very light one behind where the grasses are going to come over the top. And anywhere else I'm finding on here that there's a little bit of a bright bit, it might be the top of the bank or something that's capturing a bit more light than normal, going with a bit more white in there so it pops out a little bit. And then you can, you know, look around and do that, so lighten some of the areas or that you think might be a slightly lighter tone than that. I'm just dabbing it on, but you could do it anyhow. So I think it's good to explore the natural way that your hand wants to move. Just let it go. If you're finding you're doing all of this kind of moving it round or side to side or up and down, it feels good, that's what you should do. Just follow that. Oh, I want to try, if you've got a different blue in your kit, then you can do that. Hmm. You could go in with a bit of turquoisey or something, or phthalo blue, which I'm going to try a little bit. This is a slightly different blue colour. I've got the phthalo blue there. I'm mixing with a bit of white this time. So that'll give me a completely different kind of a bluish tint because it's a very different colour. So you can see that, which I'm going to pop in here. It's a little bit more, I'd say, turquoisey. A bit more depth to it as phthalo blue. But just go with the ones you've got. So we're still kind of exploring all of these different, got this bit in the middle as well, where these grasses are. And on here, this is where, this top of this bit of this bank here, is where we've got this lovely peachy colour. So I'm going to mix in a little bit this orangey colour that I've mixed up with some white. And maybe a bit of the yellow as well, actually. And then just start to, I'm not going to over mix it because we've got a blue base, but I'm just going to pop on where I think is right. But it's where it's where the sky's been reflected, isn't it? Now, if you've gone for a different colour sky like I have, you could go, you know, make these colours much brighter. We're just kind of separating out the different zones with the different snow on it. And I'll just take a last pause there and come and chat to everyone before I finish off and demonstrate a bit of the grasses. See how everyone's getting on. Okay, so we'll have a little look at these grasses now. And so it's just thinking about the different colours in the grasses so that we can get these grasses, like the depth of them. And when I mean the depth, I mean that we've not just got this flat kind of when we've got a clump of grasses, you'll see like in the shadowy bits at the bottom and kind of whichever bits are most in the shadow, you tend to get darker colours. And if we have a mixture of colours in there, the grasses get thicker and feel like a clump. But we've also got the direction that the grasses are going and how that they kind of, well, it's not line, is it? But how they, you know, show you know, the curve of the bank of where the snow and the sand is underneath. So we've got a few things going on there. So I'm going to introduce a fan brush to you, but I'm also just going to use this ordinary brush to start with as well. I'm just going to think about, it's not feeling, most of this isn't feeling warm. There are, because it's quite cool, even though the light colours are quite cool, but then occasionally we've got this lovely reflected peachy colours weave through, which is fabulous. So I'm just going to start with the ones further away. And we've got some of these darker areas underneath. So I'm going to go in with a bit of this brown and a bit of the buff titanium, but you can mix that buff titanium. You can just, to the brown, you can just put a little bit of white and a little tiny bit of yellow in there if you want to. And all I'm going to do, I'm just going to just use this flat brush. It's not a tiny one for this space, but I'm just pulling up or pulling kind of groups of it. Now, it's not going to look like grasses at this stage, so don't worry. It's what we do to it later that will make it a bit look more grass-like. I'm just getting the shadow, the bottom areas of the bit that's going on there, so we've at least got a start. And then you can start to put the next ones in if you want to. I'm going to, there's a bit of one at the top of this bank here. I'm just going to pop in the base of it here. So I'm pulling it up and then I'm also a little scan where else can see them. So down here at the top there, I'm seeing some. This is just the shadowy bit, so it will feel more intense and a little bit not like it's going to. We have to have a bit of faith that it's going to actually work out, because it's always the last minute with acrylics. It doesn't happen at the beginning because we're layering up and using this technique. It takes time. It's not a quick fix at all. And then a couple of little strands here that are darker. A little bit of one there. So I'm going to start with that. So then we need to build on there and have a look at some of the other straw-like colours. So you can go in with, I won't go in just with buff titanium. I'm going to go in with a bit of yellow. Doesn't matter which one. I'm going to put a bit of warm one in there as well. Even if we use a warm one, we can add white to make it pastel-y. Then I'm going to add some white. And then I'm going to go in with, let's see. Actually, I put just a little bit of orange in it. And then I'm going to put the tiniest bit of brown. The reason I'm putting a tiny bit of brown in is it just flattens the colour off slightly. And it's not very warm. It's light, but not very warm. So I don't want too much in. I put a few of those tones in so that some of it will have a bit of that colour. And then you will go with either a thinner brush, or you could try a fan brush, which I've got here. And we want just to use like the edge of it here. And the kind of messier, or an old bristly brush would work. You know, one where it's all dried up works really well. So you want kind of some gaps between it. And I'm just going to put a little bit on the edge. And then I'm just going to drag it over the top. You could do this with a finer brush than the one you've used as well. If you haven't got a fan, it's fine. So, for example, we'll just get a smaller, trying to find it, smaller round brush, and you can just work some of these hairs through like that. Same over here. So what we're starting to see, it's starting to get a little bit more shape because we're bringing in a couple of different tones over the top. And it'll start to thicken up and not just feel like a dark line. And you can pull it in the direction it's supposed to go as well. That helps. And then if you've got any, if there's any that are, I've got a bit of a highlight on the top, like it might be a bit peachy, for example, because of the, it might be a bit peachy because it's picking up this really nice colour from the sky. You can then start to bring in just a few, in a few careful places where you can see it, start to bring it in. A few peachy ones. Or some yellowy tones or whatever it is you can see, just in a few places. And then finally, the very lightest. So it might be that some of those are a bit, maybe there's a bit of white in there somewhere coming across, especially over here, because some of them have got a kind of frosty. So you can start to weave in some of those colours. So all we're doing is bringing a selection of different tones through there, and it creates this kind of grass-like feel. Or it might be the ends have got like a highlight of a bit of white or something. So that's all we're doing. We're just building up each of the blocks like that. So just go for it. You know, start to look at the next lot of clumps. Same here. The first one doesn't really have to have a gap through it because we create the gap through it with the other grasses. I might just go in a bit with a finer brush though to do some of the other ones that are coming over where the clumps are, not worrying about it. So we're just building this picture up really. And once you get in a flow with it, we're just kind of moving quite naturally with it, which is really good. We're always slow with the first one because we're really thinking about how it needs to be represented, how it needs to go. But we want to just show, all we're trying to show is this flow of this lovely grassy bank and create a sense that we know it's grasses. So not every mark has to be really perfect at all. Our eye picks up on what it's supposed to be as well, because it makes sense of the fact that we've got rocks and a horizon and then there's some water and puts it all together. So again, it's weaving through these other bits of colour, or you could go in with your if you're wanting to try it, you can. You can even use a fan on its side. And again, a fan brush isn't the easiest thing to use, but I always think if you've got, often people have got lots of kit who've been doing it a while anyway, I've got lots of kit, and sometimes it's nice to try it if you've got it there.
Becky, I have to go.
So just keep working on these grasses and eventually it will all happen. It's just a work in progress always with acrylics, but a lovely one. Don't forget to get those lovely highlights and, you know, anything that's a bit brighter like the oranges, because that really adds to it, I think, when the just captures the edge of the grasses. You know, if they're, you know, the one downside of trying to fan when you've got a small piece of work is it's quite difficult to get all the little bits in. So you can always pull some through. The other thing is if you lose all your, if you lose all the depth because you've gone through so much that you've got no shadow left, just pop your shadow back through a bit. That's absolutely fine to do. Sometimes we put so many things in there, we can't actually see the shape of the grasses anymore. So you can just go back and just pop a little bit in of anything, to be honest. We're very lucky with acrylics. It's a very lovely material to work with because it's very forgiving, which is great. Right, so just keep going through with it. So any more, just little bits of grasses, etc. It may be, I think there's some, this is what I'm saying, there's some quite frosty ones here, which we can pop in. Just wherever you want to. And also you can take them out. So if you're doing like a bank of them and you think, oh, do you know, I don't like this little group of them here, then just don't put them in. You don't we can take anything out of a and do our completely our own artist impression completely. You don't have to you know, stick with anything we don't want to. It's the artistic license, it's your choice. You're the artist. Which is lovely. And you shall choose. And then any of these little bits that pick up the light bright areas, pop those in. Any little ones that are on their own as well, you know, like I was saying, sometimes you get just some of them that are going across or here or there. Little ones that just cross over and catch the light, for example. Just get those in as well. And that's it really. It's your interpretation and just enjoying the colours tonight and getting into painting. Just enjoying these beautiful colours and relaxing really. I'm going to stop there actually. Yeah, I'll just take off this little bit of tape. And then, you know, you've just created your own lovely, lovely little artist impression. And we'll take our final pause there. I hope you've really enjoyed that. It's been a joy. Absolutely lovely to do with you all.